movie, right? Judy Garland. Do we have any you love old movies people in the room? Like Turner Classic movie stuff? My wife's raising her hand. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, there you go. All right, the movies are fun. We actually did a whole At the Movie series a while back. And what's so interesting about movies, and this is kind of where we're going to kick off from today, is you watch movies, and when you get into movies, one thing matters more than anything else when you get into a movie, right? And it's not who the main character is, even if Brad Pitt is that person. It's not like you get into the movie. Some of you are like, do you like Brad Pitt? Yeah. It's a small enough room where I see it. That's really great. No, it's great. You get into these, there's the people that are in it, but at the core of these sort of movies and the thing that draws you in isn't just the movie itself. It's not who's starring in it. At the end of the day, you have these moments in movies where there's tension, right? There's ultimately tension in a movie. If you don't feel tension, you go to sleep. How many of you have ever been to a midnight showing that you fell asleep in? Did anybody else have anybody? You were so hopeful. You showed up. You got there. You got your popcorn, and midway through, you're like, I'm done. I'm done. And a lot of that, it's not because it wasn't filmed well. It was filmed really well. And it's not because it wasn't good. It might have been good. It was that you didn't feel what was going on in the movie, right? Now, some of my favorite movies are the ones where there's high drama, another one of my favorite movies, Good Will Hunting. Anybody, do we have any Good Will Hunting? Yeah. Great movie. You have these movies where you have this deep tension that sort of reveals itself over time. And then oftentimes, you see this in movies all the time, where there's a reminder, right? There's some point in the movie where there's a moment where the person who's kind of going through whatever the tension is or the struggle is, has this moment about a reminder or sort of a repackaging or reviewing what had happened in the past that kind of propels them into what's going to happen in the future. And if you're a Good Will Hunting fan, if not, you should totally see that movie. It's fantastic. You got Robin Williams, and essentially he's helping somebody repackage their past and helping somebody repackage not only the past, but where they're headed in the future. Now, put in my notes, I said it this way. I said, our view of the past will shape our confidence that's going into the future. It'll shape our confidence moving into the future. And this is true of every single one of our lives, right? At the end of the day, the way that you view what's happened to you in the past is going to shape where you go in the future. It's going to shape the direction that you go. It's going to shape your experience. It's going to shape how the way that you treat people around you and their experience of you. What's happened in the past is going to shape the future. And the other thing is this: you were told stories as a kid and growing up that shaped your view of your family's past. How many of you ever sat down with a mom or a grandparent or something like that, and they sat you down and told you the same story for the umpteenth time? You've heard it 40 times, they tell you the same story, and you know it's slightly exaggerated, and by slightly, they're lying, but there's parts of this, you know what I mean? It's just a little bit of a different thing, and they sit you down, and they're you remember that time when, and they kind of drew you into the story. And when you're a kid, and you know this, when you're 6, 7, 8, 9, 13 years old, whatever, there's something about you that's oh my gosh, I've heard this at some point. And then you get to your 20s, and if you're anything like me, now I want to hear the same story again. I want to hear my mom tell me the same story over and over again. I wanted to hear my grandmother tell me the same story over and over and over again, because there was something about that. There was almost like a symbol. There was almost like a reminder. There was something about that that was kind of shaping the way that I would think about the future. And I think that's actually a deeply spiritual practice. In fact, when you look through the scriptures, you find that idea over and over and over again. And the truth of the matter is, there are parts of your life right now, whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, that you're probably really confident in, and parts of your life that you look at and you go I don't know that I'm confident in that at all. There are parts of your life where you kind of look to the future and you're confident about where you're going, and there are other parts where you go, I just don't know what to do with that. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at an area of the Bible that we touched on a few weeks ago, and we're going to pick up from that and kind of go a little bit further. The area of the Bible that we're looking at is in Joshua, and this is an area of the Old Testament that I think is so much fun to read. So if you don't read your Bible often, or if you're new to it, Joshua is one of those things where you have this leader who's stepping in after another leader. He's stepping in after Moses. There's this whole thing where God promises something that's coming to a whole group of people, and then the person that he promised it to isn't really going to get to experience it, and this new leader's about to step in, lead them to it, and you have all of these interesting emotions and all these interesting sort of subtext and what's going on. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about kind of briefly what we mentioned last week, and then we're going to build upon it. So this is Joshua chapter 1. Essentially what's happening is Joshua stepping in, following Moses, that Moses, to lead this group of people into the land that God promised them to go. And here's what it says. It says, be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law of my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be, and you kind of see this with a leader stepping in, successful wherever you go. And this is the part that's so interesting, and I love this. He says this, and keep this book of the law always on your lips, or always be talking through through it, always be processing it, and meditate on it day and night so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. So you have this young leader, or ish young. I mean, back then it was probably not young in our standard. He's stepping into it. He's following Moses into what's to come. And then you have this part that I think is so fascinating. He says this. Goes on, it says, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. And can we say this together? And do not be afraid, which is great. That never works and it's never helpful, right? You ever told your kid this? Like, just don't be afraid of monsters. You know, like it doesn't work at 3 a.m. Like it doesn't. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord, your God, will be with you wherever you go. And then what happens next is you get these like marching orders for what's to come. And you get what he's supposed to lead into. And this is the part that I think is probably the most fascinating thing about what he's being led to and where God's leading him. It says this. So Joshua ordered the officers of this group of people, go through your camp and tell the people, get your provisions ready. 3 days from now, you will cross the Jordan, which we'll talk about in a second, here to go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God is giving you for your own. Now, this is where it's so fascinating. If you haven't read this area of the Bible, it's so interesting. What's about to happen is God had promised this group of people this area where they were going to go into, and they were going to finally not be like this nomadic sort of thing, this like amoeba-like thing wandering all over the place. They're going to finally go to the place that God had promised them to go. But to get there, if you know the story, you know it, there's the Jordan, which is a river, and not just like a river, not just like an Ohio sort of thing. Like it's always interesting. We're not talking about like one of the things that goes downtown in Dublin. Right? We have this like river that's over flood season, over 100 miles wide, right? Over 100 miles wide. It's this raging sort of thing, especially during flood season. It's the time that they were going into it. And God's saying, hey, I want you to go and you're going to cross that river, which is cute and funny because it almost feels like a joke. Because you don't cross that river. You don't hop on your yachts. You don't call like Lonely Island guys and go on a boat and go do your thing, right? If you know, you know. You don't go do that. What you end up doing is looking at that river and going, that's a really cute thing to say. How does that happen? And he's calling Joshua to step out in a deep level of faith, to walk out and go cross this thing that feels so much bigger and so much further and so much more than they could do. And so as you progress through these chapters, you find, and we've talked about this before, but this is the area we're going to pick up where Joshua gets this group of people. He asks them to get ready. They migrate and kind of head to this area. And what happens next, I think, is so interesting. Here's what it says. It goes on and it says this. So when the whole nation finished crossing the Jordan, so they get there, they get to the Jordan. What happens is when they step in, they send the Ark of the Covenant, or what was symbolized or viewed as God's presence, in there first. God's presence goes first. The water and the flood just stops. And so they end up crossing the Jordan. They go through this entire people group, which is hard to imagine this many people at one time, crossing in the area where the water stops. They get to the other side. So when the whole nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord then says to Joshua, choose 12 men among the people, one from each tribe, and tell them to take up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, from right where the priests are standing, and carrying them over with you, and put them down at the place where you stay. Which is like this really weird, interesting, highly emotional moment for this group of people. So they send the presence of God out there before the whole nation comes. The water and the flood stops. It's almost like God's parting the Red Sea type thing again for this group of people. He goes before them, does the miraculous thing that felt impossible. And then after everybody goes, I want you to picture this. There's these priests like holding the ark still in the area that the water was in. And Joshua's told, go and you get these 12 stones to come back and take with you. So Joshua does. It goes on and it says this. Yeah, it says, so Joshua called together the 12 men he had appointed from the Israelites, this group of people, one from each tribe, and said to them, go over before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan. Now, this is one of those parts that I think when you read the Bible, it can be so easy to miss and so easy to pass through. And this is one of the most interesting things about it. God sends this group of people, or these guys that are going to go get these stones, back into the middle and the heart of the obstacle that he just overcame on their behalf. To get the reminder to bring back so that when they look into the future and what's to come, they are reminded of God's faithfulness from the heart of the obstacle and the thing that he pulled them from. And then you get this moment where there's like this vision casting moment. He says this. He says, and each of you is to take up a stone on his shoulders. We're not talking about little pebbles. We're talking about these big rocks with these guys who look a lot like me and are very strong. That's not funny. No, I'm just kidding. Takes a rock and they go forward and they take these stones. shoulder, according to the number of tribes of the Israelites, to serve as a sign among you, which again, this is one of those fascinating like Old Testament things where there's all these like different tribes. It was a reminder for each people among this larger people group of God's faithfulness. And then you get to the part that I think is so fun, and this is the part that I think is probably most applicable to us. Then you get the moment where there's a vision cast that goes beyond them into things, again, that they may not see or experience. It says this. It says, in the future, when your children ask you, what do these stones mean? Tell them that the flow of the Jordan, the 100-mile long during flood season sort of thing that was not crossable for people, right? Tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, or the presence of the Lord. And when it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off, and these stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever. Now, this is one of those things that you might have heard in Bible school or vacation Bible school, and there's like the flannel graph thing, and maybe they had the water and whatever they're teaching it. And as a kid, you're like, oh, that's so cool. But as a parent or as a grandparent, or you think about like talking to this with people that you're mentoring, it's different. It's different when you sit somebody down and say, this is the faithfulness of God in this particular area. Look what he did. And I think in our culture, and I am as guilty about this as anybody else on the planet, we are so good and so gifted at being distracted and moving fast and hustling and getting things done and being on Twitter or Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok or Facebook. Or, I keep going, but you get it. Yeah. You're impressed that I knew all those, though, a little bit, right? And you get to the end of all of that, and you get to the end of your day, and you're just tired. And you're just enough distracted where you miss the moments of reminding yourself of the ways that God has been extremely faithful in your life. Now, I put in my notes, and I want to ask you a question. And some of you in the room, you've been followers of Jesus for a long time. Some of you are newer to your faith. Some of you are still processing this. But if you were to think about the things over the past year that you had no control over that God seemed to show up in, when was the last time that you paused long enough to remind yourself of the things that you didn't make happen for yourself, but that God did on your behalf? Or you say it this way, and this is the way I phrased it. Where have you seen God's faithfulness in the past year in your own life, right? Where have you like paused and gone like, I prayed for that thing, and then like it happened, and I might have said, hey, thanks so much. That's awesome. Thank you. I passed the test. I don't know, whatever it was, like, or you healed somebody, or hey, you gave us the house that we were looking for. Hey, I got that promotion, that sort of thing. Or I had this moment with my kids where they finally opened up to me, and you felt that sort of thing. Like you had all of these sorts of things, and you did like a quick like, hey, thanks. But you didn't process and remind yourself continually of God's faithfulness along the way. Again, one of the things that I just sort of miss, and you know this if you have family members maybe who've passed away, in those conversations is I think at least a generation or two behind me was so good at just remembering the ways that God was so incredibly faithful over and over and over again. I had an aunt. I couldn't pronounce her name as a kid. Her name was Elizabeth, so we called her Aunt Bubba. And I want you to picture this, and I'm going to try to be as kind as I possibly can. She was very, very wonderful, one of the best cooks on the planet. She was a very large, older lady in her, I don't know, at the time she was like late 80s, and she would sit there in her lazy boy recliner, and she had a donut, which was like a thing that helped her sit on it, and she would just sit there and just talk. And it was just story after story after story. And it wasn't like Mother Goose stuff. It was like, I remember when you were born, one of these. And I'm like, I think most of it's true. I think, you know what I mean? And I remember when God did this, and God did this, and God did this, and don't you ever forget, I'll never forget, I had migraines. I still have migraines. I had migraines as a kid. And I remember as a kid, and you might have this too, where there are people that you want to pray for you just because they pray a little bit different. And the reason I always went to her is because she prayed so different, because she had so much faith. I have a migraine, I kid you not, and not to be weird, but I'd get on the phone, and she had one of those dial-up, like, you know what I'm talking about, one of these things? And she'd pick up, and she would pray for me over the phone, and they would go away. And I'm like, what is that, And she's like, don't you forget. You're always like, don't you forget God's faithfulness over and over and over again. And sometimes a lot of the ways that we experience God or experience the power of God in our lives feel small in the moment. But compounded over time, when we stop and think about the ways that he works in our lives, it's extraordinarily powerful and beautiful in the ways that he cares about the littlest things that oftentimes we miss over and over again. Some of you, when you think about this past year, the last place you ever thought you would find yourself in is a church, especially at a 9:30 service on a Sunday morning, you know? And yet you're here. Some of you have been praying for people over and over and over again, and it felt like God said no, and then all of a sudden he said yes. And God's faithfulness just seems to be so powerful in your life over and over again. And in 1 year anniversary, there's a part of me, I went like 4 versions of this talk, right? I mean, including about 25 minutes ago, still working on it. There's a part of me that's like, yeah, take the hill, let's go. And we're going to do that too in just a minute, I promise. But then there's a part of me that goes, but don't forget the ways that God has been extraordinarily faithful in your life and in my life and in all of our lives over the past year. And so I was thinking about this today. The more that I thought about it, the more that I thought, what I would love for you to do and what I would love to do is futuristic is like my number one strengths finder. So like that's like my number one thing. So I'm always like, how do we think about the future? And so what I'd love for you to do for a minute is if you can, I want you to like fast forward as much as you can like a year from now, right? A year from now, and let's just assume you still continue to come to our 9:30 service, and now it's year 2, and there's like a third inflatable out there and all this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? There's all this stuff going on. And you show up and you pull in. And if you're going to take that moment and look back over the course of the year that's to come for you, what do you hope happens? Like, what are the things that you've been doing this to that you actually need to do this to God with? What are the things that you're tempted to stop praying about because he hasn't answered you yet, but you know simultaneously that he cares and you need to continue to pray for? Who is the person that you want to be a year from now? Some of you have taken extraordinary steps spiritually over the last year, and you know that. But what are the steps that God's calling you to take in this coming year personally? Now, I'll tell you for me, as I've thought about this, I'm going to give you the 2 things that I'd love for you to think about if you're going to fast forward. And the first one is this, right? And I wish I could figure out a really catchy way to say this. I just couldn't. What I wish I could convince everybody to do over the next year is not to become more spiritual. You're spiritual enough. You got up at like 8 o'clock to get here at a 9:30 service. Like, you're spiritual enough. You're spiritual. You get it. But I want you to think about, what does it look like to build a relationship with Jesus, right? And some of you, the answer to this question is, hey, I need to not be as apathetic and lean in. Like that you've been a follower of Jesus for a while. Like, your thing is like, I just need to lean in. I actually need to take it a little bit more seriously. Like, we talk about quiet times and those kind of things. We'll talk about that in a second. And you remember the 4 that you did this past year, and that was fantastic. And if anybody asks you if you're a follower of Jesus, like, absolutely. But when I talked about Joshua, you're like, I feel like I touched on that like 9 years ago. You know what I mean? But you haven't actually read through it in a long time. You haven't engaged deeply. For some of you, it's like, I'm going to not kind of engage in being apathetic anymore. For some of you, right? Some of you, this is actually, we talked about prayer a while back. This is actually a version of you where you're not just trying to get head knowledge, that you're actually trying to get a relationship, and you're building a relationship with Jesus, which causes you to listen. For some of you, the best thing that you could do this year is to go, I'm going to prioritize listening to what God is saying to me. And some of you, you're skeptical or you're curious, you're not a follower of Jesus, and you're here, but you're like, I'm not sure what to do with it all. And I'll tell you, this is the part where I'd go, I wish everybody who was curious about faith in general would get extremely curious about Jesus in particular, right? Christianity is not just a religion. It's not even just built on a lot of the Christianity stuff that we talk about. It's built on a person, and the person is Jesus. And the question is, what do you think about him? That's the ultimate question. So I'll tell you, for me, I kind of broke this down into 3 sort of questions. The first one is this, right? God, what do you want to say to me, right? If I'm going to take time out and embrace this issue, what do you want to say to me, right? The second one is this: what do you want to do inside of me, right? Not just what do you want to say to me, what do you want to do inside of me? What's the pieces of my heart that need to be enough broken for you to do something with? What do you want to do inside of me? And the third one is this: what do you want to do through me? Now, I'm going to tell you this, and I know this. If you've been a follower of Jesus for a long time, you've heard questions like this, and it's so easy to go, yeah, I've done that. And at the same time, go week in and week out where you don't engage these deeply. These are simple questions that are extraordinarily complex when you actually engage them. What is it that God wants to say to you? What is it that he wants to do in you? And ultimately, what does he want to do through you as a person? Now, I'll just be really open. Can I just be like really, really open? We'll rah-rah in a second, I promise. But the past year, everybody was like, church planting is going to be hard. And I was like, yeah, it'd be fine. You know what I mean? Like, it'd be good. And in all the ways that everybody talked about it would be hard, I didn't experience any of those in particular. All the ways that people thought it would be hard, I was like, no, it's great. The places that I felt it being the hardest were actually areas that were blindsiding, that I never thought about, I never would have anticipated. And it really caused me to really look at these three questions, not from a perspective or a posture of going like, what is it you want to do for our whole church? But it was like, God, you're actually doing surgery in my heart in a specific way. Some of you know this. I won't rehash all these stories because you've heard them before. But we launched our church, and a few weeks later, we were in the hospital with our newborn baby. And it really, really wasn't great. I'll never forget, like 3 a.m., I had given like the church stuff over to God. I'd given like finance stuff over to God. We had like, all these sorts of things. The one thing that I held so tightly to, it wasn't that I didn't even give, I just didn't trust him with, was my kids. I just didn't. I want to control and protect everybody that I care about. The one, not one, I'm sure there's a lot, but the one that was like just uprooted in me over the last year and a half was that there are things that I love that I don't have control over that God cares about. What matters most to me matters to God. And I remember sitting there going, I pray enough, I read enough, and I go like, nothing prepared me for holding him going, I don't know what to do with this. I don't, and I actually said this out loud, which is what you want to pray in the hospital when you're a pastor and doctors are around. I don't trust you with this. I don't know that I do. And it caused me to actually do work. And God, like, what do you want to say to me about this? What is it that you actually want to do in me about this? And handing over the things that I was holding so tightly to actually affected every other area of my life. But if you don't engage and you don't do it, then you miss that sort of thing. Some of you know this. I'll tell you one more quick story. You know this. If you were around, how many of you were here when we were at the exchange? Is anybody here in the exchange? I know some of you were here in the exchange. Yeah. How many of you were, let's do it this way. How many of you were not here when we were at the exchange? How many of you were? So you wouldn't know this. It's fun. We launched our church. The stuff happened with Oliver. I went to Texas for a little while. When I came back, this is interesting for me at least. I was in Texas. We were walking around. I had a series prepared that I was super excited about, all these messages that we were going to do. And I was like, this is the one that everybody comes to, and this is when we really grow. Like, this is the one. And I was praying in Texas, something about Texas. And I was there. And I felt just so deeply that God was saying, no, I want you to speak on giving. Which I'm like, nobody speaks on giving as their third series in a church plant. That is bad. That's just not what you do. And not only that, I felt like I needed to do a 4-week series on it. And for the next 2 days, I was like, nope, that's cute. Nope, that's the devil. Nope, you know what I mean? Like, no, that's not it. Stop eating pizza. You know what I mean? Like, I was doing all these things. And I'm on a plane, I'll never forget, and I texted a few people about it who are extremely wise and very, very, like, from other churches that church planted before. I'm like, here's what I really feel like we need to do. And they're like, one guy literally goes, you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you should. And I remember getting back on the plane, and we decided to do it. And so some of you were here. We did a 4-week series on generosity and giving, and so many of you stepped up. We went through, and not only that, we doubled down. We not only asked you to give, but we asked you to fill out a card and commit. And then we went back and we saw all and I was floored. And it was like 2 weeks after that we found out we lost the exchange. And that series propelled us into being able to come back. And both your hearts being ready and our hearts being ready to go. And also, thank you so much for committing to give. And we need to raise about $80,000 in about, I forgot what it was, like a month and a half, 2 months. And we came back, and God prepared your hearts, prepared us, and we flew into this season. And you gave, just so sacrificially to make this building thing happen. And then you notice we got into this building in 40 days because you showed up not just in generosity with your giving. You showed up in generosity with your time. Right? You came and you painted walls. You may not know this. We painted this entire room in a day. And it took us 39 other days to paint every other room. But we painted this one in a day, because you showed up. And here's what I'm going to tell you, right? When it comes to these 3 questions, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to challenge you to do. And it's going to feel a little bit odd. And I know it's going to feel a little bit odd. For the next 3 months, everybody that attends our church, follower of Jesus or not, I'm going to ask you to commit to doing something. I'm going to ask you to commit to spending time every day. It could be 2 minutes. It could be 5 minutes. It could be an hour, whatever it is for you. I'm going to ask you to read your Bible, which feels weird when I say it. You in particular, Read your Bible. That's what I grew up with. You. And we're going to read through the New Testament together. In fact, if you're on our text thread or email thread, you're going to get this today. We're going to send you a Bible reading plan for the next 3 months. And it doesn't take long to read through, the Gospels is what we're going to read through together, right? First 4 books of the New Testament, the story of Jesus and who he is, right? We're going to read this together for the next 90 days. I'm going to challenge you to do that. And I'm going to challenge you to pray at some point every day. And some of you are going to go like, I'm praying to the ceiling. Some of you are going like, I'm praying to whatever's up there. Some of you are going to pray to Jesus particularly, which is what I hope you do. And we're going to do this together because I want you to commit for 90 days to building your relationship with Jesus. And the second thing we're going to do before we put it up there, don't put it up there yet, it's going to feel really odd. It's going to feel weird, and it's going to feel a little bit backwards. So I'm going to tell you that up front. I love how some of you just immediately look at the confidence monitor like, I can find out right now. That's great. Yeah, that's great. All right, here's what I want you to do. Here's what I want you to do. The next one's going to feel odd. It's going to feel like a stretch, and it's going to feel weird because a pastor's asking to do it. So I wish I could just bring somebody else up here and ask you to do it, but I'm going to tell you why it's so important in a second. The next thing I want you to do is I want you to invite somebody to church and to this place. Now, if you're skeptical like I am, you're like, oh, it's because he wants a big church. I'm like, we've led really, really, really big churches. Great. We've been a part of that stuff. We're already a pretty big church. You know what I mean? It's not like we're small. Yeah, I get those things. Here's why this matters. For you to grow in your faith, 2 things I think have to happen. The first thing is you have to have the daily discipline to grow in your faith and building a relationship with Jesus. The second thing that a lot of people miss is that you have to see your faith through the eyes of other people who don't see it the way that you do. And this is a weird thing, and I know that it's weird. I tell people this all the time when they come to church too. I'm like, you never get the fullness of what our church is until you sit next to somebody who you're a little bit like clinched with the whole time going, please don't suck today, Patrick. You know what I mean? Worship leader, please don't say anything too weird. You know what I mean? Like, don't say, please. There's a little bit of that where you go like, I want this to go so well, not for me, but for somebody else that I love and that I care about. And I'll tell you this, and I know this sounds weird, and you're like, oh, it's so true. Of course, you're a pastor, of course you have to say this, and I get it. But I'm just telling you, until you invite somebody and lean in and care about somebody enough to go, this matters in your life more than anything else that we're going to talk about over the next 3 months, you will not grow as quickly as in your faith as you could. It's just true, and you know this. Until you're so engaged with your faith that you have the daily discipline and also the daily care for other people to go, this matters. Now, come on, you know this. You just won't. So I put it on my notes and said it this way. I said, everyone knows someone who needs Jesus. Everybody does. And not the idea of Jesus, not the out there version, not the cosmic prayer guy, not that. The person and the salvific work of Jesus. And the second thing is this, right? Your faith grows when you're helping other people grow. Right? You know this, right? You grow as a parent when you talk about parenting. You just do. You grow in business and leadership when you talk about business and leadership. You just do, right? Now, I'll say this, and then we're going to wrap up here in just a second. I wish I could. Can you bring me this, Cindy? Yeah, let me bring you this real quick. And then we're going to wrap up our time here in just a second, and we're going to get you guys out there. Thank you. Everybody give it up for Cindy, who's been here since pretty much day one. All right. I was trying to think of the best way to give you an illustration, and so we're just going to use this actual illustration. Here we go. So this chair, you may not know this. This is going to gross some of you out, but we'll talk about that later. We are the 3rd church to use these chairs, right? Some of you are like, oh, God. That's great. They're like 25 years old, right? There's a church here in the city that had used them, and we got them because they were for free, and they were great, right? Yeah, I love free. So they gave us these chairs, which is amazing. And then another church has been using them for a lot of years. And I got this amazing opportunity probably 3 weeks ago to sit with a pastor who's retired, who was the original pastor that bought these chairs for his church. And ironically, this is just the wildest thing, they started meeting first, you know where they met? At La Scala, which is hilarious. I know, that's hilarious. They were back in the other side. And I laughed. I was like, well, we got the whole building. So, he didn't like that. Anyway, and I love this. And so we're sitting there, and I told him, I was like, you may not even know this, but you guys donated all these chairs to somebody else, and they actually donated them to us. He goes, oh, my God. And his first reaction was this, and I love this. He you watch somebody stare off for a second in space, and he's an older guy, so he kind of had this grandfather kind of moment. He looks at me, and he's like, oh, man, when I think about those chairs, I remember. And then he just started telling me story after story after story. He told me stories about people. I don't know. This was always so funny. He's like, he's like, man, I never thought they'd come to church. And I was like, yeah. Do you have people like that? I was like, yeah, a lot. And he's like, and we would pray. And we would pray over these chairs over and over and over again. And we'd pray that God would heal marriages. And all of a sudden, he was healing marriages. And we'd pray that God would do something in the lives of high school students. All of a sudden, he was doing something in the lives of high school students. And he goes, and I'll never forget, he goes, the person that we thought would be the least likely to come to faith came to faith in one of those chairs. He goes, I remember the day that he did it. And I thought to myself, I was like, these chairs are so fascinating because we got them for free and we were super excited to have, chairs. But I never thought about the fact that you're not the first person to sit in it. You won't be the last person to sit in that chair. That there will be a day there are people that you are inviting and bringing to this place that you're processing your faith through their eyes. That'll come and they'll come to faith in this next year in one of these seats because you were intentional about it. And when I think about the story that we read from Joshua, when I think about the reminders of God's faithfulness, what's beautiful about it is though we're a new church that's a year old, we're standing on the shoulders of people who have been doing work here for a long time. And you're partnering with people, not just at our church, but across our city to see people experience the power and the love of Jesus. And the thing that you and I could do, and this is just honest, is get comfortable enough to be a consumeristic Christian and to be comfortable enough coming and doing our thing and leaving and never actually diving deep enough into our hearts to allow the Holy Spirit to move and transform us. And come on, we live in Dublin, Ohio, or Hilliard, or we live in Columbus. It's a great city. You're doing pretty good, but there's a part of you that could get comfortable enough to just be one of those Christians who's a good, humanistic, moral person that hasn't submitted their life to Christ. And you could be a person who comes here every week. You could even volunteer. You could do all these things. And never, ever, ever, ever join the movement of people in our city who decided to take a step beyond that and go, I am going to live my life for people that are not here yet. I'm going to believe in what Jesus teaches enough to go, the empty chairs matter here. So I'll tell you what we're going to do. And I don't want it to feel salesman-y at all. In fact, I was really close to having somebody else do this portion of the talk because I know that as a pastor guy, I get that. But what I want for you, and this is what I want for you over the next 3 months, everybody that's here, it's part of our church, I want you to come on a Sunday, sitting next to somebody else, and I want you to text me, please don't suck today. I need this to be good because I invited somebody to one of those empty chairs. And I want you to pray for those people to come. So I'll tell you what we're doing next week. I'll tell you what we're doing next week. We're kicking off a series called Emotions. You guys saw a video about that with all the emojis, smiley, and hearts and stuff, which is kind of fun. So here's what we're going to do. I know you've already filled out stuff today. I'd love for you to reach under your seat, and there's a card that has emotions on it. So go ahead and pull out that card real fast. If you could do that. Grab that card, pull it out. I'm going to invite the band to come back up. Here's what we're going to do. This is going to feel a little weird to some of you. Cindy, I'm going to give you this. Can I give you this chair back? Is that all right? Or can I give it to you, Travis? Thanks, dude. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. All right. What I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to take one of those cards, or two of those cards. We'll give you however many of you want, up to 420, which is what I ordered online. Right? But take one of those cards. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to take that card at some point this week, and I want you to pray about who God would have you to give that card to, right? I want you to think about that. Now, here's what I also know. I want you to take one of them because most of us know one person right now that we can invite and likely should invite and also have 7 excuses why we haven't invited them and aren't going to invite them. And so we're just going to do this together. We're just going to bust through that wall together, right? And so I think it's called perforated. Did I say that right? Perforated? I was a little nervous about that. I got it. The perforated part, here's what I'm going to ask you to do if you're willing, and even if you're not willing, I'd still love you to do it. I want you to write on that card, I think there's their name. I actually have one. Let me pull one of these out. Sorry, y'all can move all this. Yeah, you good. on this part of the card, I'm going to ask you to put their name, right? You put their first name. I don't care what you put initials, whatever it is. I'm going to ask you to put their name. And underneath, I'm going to ask you to put your name and your number. And here's what we're going to do. I know this is going to sound a little bit odd, but here's why it matters. I want you to put their name. I want you to put your name and your number. And what we're going to do is we're going to pray over these people. And I'll tell you, we actually do. Every once in a while, I'll post these pictures about me praying over a chair. We actually do that, right? And we're going to take these, and we're going to be praying with you, not only for the moment that you give it to them, but they'd say yes. And that you would have a moment where you're coming alongside of people and doing this together, right? So right now, if you got a pen, If you're sitting on the front rows, I think it's under your seat. I'm going to stop doing this. I feel like I'm hiking the ball every time. So grab this pen, it's nice in front of you. I want you to fill this out. Who's the name that you're going to put there? I want you to put your name and your number, and then I want you to do this. It's perforated, which is kind of cool because you can tear it off. That was cool. I don't know. I've never had a perforated card, apparently. I don't know. I want you to tear it off, right? Just like this. I want you to keep this one, and I want you to hand this one out, right? Keep this one. Hand this one out. We're going to give this one to us. There we go. Yeah, I need coffee. It's great. All right. Now, and what we're going to do is we're going to sing this song in a second. The song's called Living Hope, right? And we're going to sing it, and it's going to be great. I'm going to ask you to do something that we did a few weeks ago. Some of you did this with prayer. And some of you actually had those names in your prayer cards, which I think is amazing. I want you to take this, and what we're going to do is when we sing this song, it's going to be a little bit odd. I know it's going to be a little bit odd. It's not a super huge room, so I know it's a little bit visible. But I'm going to ask you to fill this out, and then I'm going to ask you to bring it up here, and I'm going to ask you to put it here on the front of the stage. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be praying with you through the week about the people that you're going to be inviting. And I want you, all of you, I think everybody has my cell phone number. It's an 865 number. If not, we'll give it to you. I want you to text me. I invited them. Hey, they're coming with me next Sunday. Again, please make sure it's good. All that stuff. I want you to do that. And we're going to be praying with you that God moves through you with other people, but at the same time, on the other side of this, that God works in your heart and your faith as you engage in a way that makes most of us feel a little bit uncomfortable. And I'll give you your line. You ready? I'd love for you to come to church with me on Sunday. You can sit with me. And you know what they can say? This is crazy. They'll either say yes, no, or lie to you about something they have going on. You know what I mean? And you'll be fine either way. That's what we're going to ask you to do. So I'd love for you to go ahead and stand up. Hopefully you filled that out. If not, you can finish filling it out. Stand up. Keep this with you. The band's going to sing this song, and then I'm going to ask you to come up, and we're going to put these on the front of the stage together. Me included. We'll do this together. Let me pray for us. Father, we love you so much, and we thank you for, God, what you're doing in the life of our church and in our lives as well. And Father God, you've moved in us in so many different ways over the last year, and you've helped so many of us take steps in what it means to follow you. God, this is an area that makes a lot of us feel uncomfortable or hard, and as much as we may be disciplined in the other things, it's an area that we neglect. And so God, I ask that you would do this inside of us, that you would do something in us that would give us the courage and feel the weight of what it means to come alongside of people that we love and we care about. But make an ask, an invitation, and invite you to do what only you can do in the midst of that. We love you. We thank